Continue with those live visuals coming out of Deep Kloof Square for us in Soweto this morning, where the looting has continued unabated. Really is a chaotic situation. You'll forgive our unsteady camera as the team tries to make it out of the Roots butchery, which has been, if you like, the epicenter of the looting as of the early hours of this morning. We'd mentioned time and time again, but it's perhaps worth re-emphasizing that still no police in sight. It's a situation, I think, safe to say, that's been continuing at least for about an hour now, if not longer. Since our team's been on the ground before sunrise, we've been able to witness as scores of people were able to, at some stage, even stroll in and out of that store and grab whatever is left really as of this moment, remnants of some of the stock that has now been completely looted out of that butchery. You see now some residents actually doing this with the aid of vehicles, if you like, trying to, I guess, accelerate what is taking place, the criminality in some respects. What do you and I make of this? We'll stay with these live visuals, but also bring in our guest. Let's speak to Wits School of Governance visiting fellow Judith, as well as director of the In Transformation Initiative, Roelf Meyer, both joining us via our video link. You'll see them in just a moment. There they are. To both our guests, thanks very much indeed for your time. Roelf, I wonder if I'm able to start with you. A lot of the reaction to the president's address yesterday had people wondering who on earth he was even speaking to. Plainly, did he strike the right chord?
I think the president said the right thing, in my mind at least. You know, there was very little else he could say. The question is, did the people listen? And that is probably the problem under these circumstances. Most people that are out there on the streets, busy looting, busy with other criminal activities, are not listening to a message of reason that the president tried to bring across. So, unfortunately, this has to be backed up. The president's speech has to be backed up with the right security actions. And if that doesn't happen, we are in for a problem. In other words, the security forces must back up what he said.
Right. You were part of talks that in some respects people will say assisted the country into getting into some kind of democratic dispensation. I've listened to some of the commentary in the last 24 hours of individuals saying it feels something fundamentally will change in this country after this moment. Is that a sentiment that resonates with you?
Well, you know, we have seen some of this happening in the build-up to the transition in South Africa in the early 90s and before. But I think what we're now observing is probably the worst since the turn of democracy in 1994. And the question is, what are the underlying forces and factors that play a role that have not been sufficiently addressed? I think many analysts have pointed this out, and from our perspective, we also highlighted that in fact there is a shortcoming as far as the real transformation of the country is concerned. And maybe this is now the moment where it is bursting out. I mean, what we've seen yesterday and over the weekend, probably this morning, it goes far beyond just a political protest. It's addressing the heart of the inequality gap, the heart of poverty, the heart of unemployment, etc., in the country. And those are the fundamentals that we have to address. Now, if you go back to where we produced the Constitution 25 years ago, I think the point I have to make is that the problem doesn't lie with the Constitution. It's the question of the socio-economic transformation that was not followed through. And I think that is where the problem lies.
Roelf, please stand by. It looks like one of the people taking part in this unrest is deciding to speak to us. Right, it looks like we've just missed it, in fact, just a short while ago. We're watching the situation as it unfolds also at Deep Kloof Square. So apologies if at any moment, Judith and Roelf, if I do interrupt you, if there are people who are willing to speak to us. Understandably, many are reluctant as of this morning, because I think it's clear that what is actually taking place is illegal. So, Judith, what then do we read into that? I mean, in the psyche of many people taking part in this, it is known that it is something that, dare I even say, is morally reprehensible, but that's not stopping the behavior from taking place. What does that say?
Well, good morning. Isn't it ironic that something which started as a protest in support of former President Zuma, who has looted the state and who to a large extent is responsible for our hollowed institutions, and we talk about the President's speech last night and the response. The response has got to come from the police. It's also got to come from national intelligence. We've seen the Minister of Police, Becky Cele, basically missing in inaction because we haven't seen him at all. National intelligence seems to have failed us. And in a sense, we lay that at the door of the Zuma years, where you have hollowed institutions incapable now of dealing with these security threats. But what is at the heart of this, I think a lot of it, is that there is a culture in South Africa of impunity. A president who cocks a snook at a former president at the Constitutional Court who believes that he is above the law. It makes sense that people would think that after large-scale looting of the state, that it's their turn now to loot whatever they can see and find. Some of those images are horrific, and there is something almost voyeuristic about us watching on a loop people who are engaging in criminal activity. And some of that is going to, there's a concomitant trauma to that, I think, for all of us. But this is a country which is steeped in impunity. Our roots are in impunity. Our roots are also deeply in violence. If you look at any of the local government research, I mean, what people tell you is they only come when we start to burn things. And the participatory democracy that the Constitution envisages and talks about, that's largely been broken by corruption, by an inability of the state to actually deliver to people. And so you have people burning things to be heard. And along with that comes impunity and looting in this case. It's interesting to note that in quite a few places where this has started, both in Gauteng and in KZN, there have been sites of previous sites of violence. So whether it's truckers, for example, on the N3, remember the xenophobic violence in 2015 and also in 2019 in the CBD in Durban. So these are hotbeds within our cities and within our towns. And I don't know that South Africa can continue as it has on this path. We need to have a far larger discussion about how we deal with deep levels of poverty, deep levels of unemployment, but also deep levels of inequality. And how do we change things and shift things so that we don't see these levels of depravity that we're seeing playing out on our television screens as we speak.
Right. Judith, I'm going to pause you.
So yes, this step the community. But manje, why uluta umtasa when you awajabulanga? Angijabulanga ngiphethe ukudla. Yeah. Because onkumuntu uyathatha and it's my first lena igrocery yokuqala, my pegs awuqala, yeah. So like in Namaphosa, they want to go to like Konkumun and the government, they are also apart from this thing, yeah. But thank you, yeah. Shop.
All right, the sentiment from one of the people taking part there in the ongoing looting in the early hours of this morning. Those are live visuals from Diepkloof Square for us. A quick translation for you. That was just one individual saying that she is now taking part because it appears that the free-for-all continues. She is a bit concerned about COVID-19 and all the other related public health considerations to be made. But as far as she's concerned, no one is getting harmed, and so she'll also get involved. In fact, one of the things she mentioned is that this is her first share, if you like, of what is now clearly available to everyone. Roelf, let me bring you back into the discussion. The social compact comes up for us. What that person also mentioned is that it appears that security or law enforcement is okay with the status quo. That's certainly something that we should be worried about.
Yeah, I think it's a question whether whether they are prepared for, or were prepared for the situation, like Judith was saying, and I think that is the real problem. Not so much the question of whether they are just onlookers, but rather were they prepared to handle a situation like this? And I think we have seen during the last few days they were not. And I think this is the big problem as far as the security forces are concerned. They are unprepared for situations to protect the well-being of the nation in general.
Right.
But coming back to your point about the reasons for this, I think on the one side there's obviously the political protest that's started the whole thing off. But what we are now seeing is totally unacceptable in terms of blatant looting and criminality.
In fact, Judith, very quickly, I think it was Julius Malema on Twitter saying that there needs to be a political solution to this. If you agree, what does that look like? Is it time for the president, someone else in higher echelons of society, physically being there to try and address what is taking place on the ground?
Well, I don't know what Julius Malema means by a political solution. I would only guess that he's talking about a political solution with regard to former President Zuma and trying to pressurize the Constitutional Court into rescinding the application, into rescinding its judgment that was handed down by Justice Kampepe on the contempt of court. I would say that would be, if the court was pressured, if we were going that route, it would be a sad day for our apex court. As Justice Kampepe said, the Constitution would then not be worth the paper it's written on. I think South Africa has to meet this moment. It's a sad, sad moment for our country when you have these sorts of scenes playing out. Economic sabotage, there is violence, people have lost their lives. And of course, if former President Zuma was a leader of any kind, like Madiba was when Chris Hani was assassinated, when he told people to throw their weapons into the sea, he would be sending the right message. But this is someone who's conducted his political life with impunity, so we can't expect that. Neither can we expect it from the ANC, which is divided. And one worries as to why the police minister is absent. But I really do think we need to meet the moment, and President Ramaphosa needs to, if there was ever a time for him to expend his political capital, now is that moment.
Yeah, with the time I have left, Roelf, I mean, if I can just pick your brains on perhaps solutions in the past that have worked. I mean, you've mentioned this in some instance, but given your experience in the 1990s about what it actually takes to move a country forward, what do you reckon needs to happen next?
Well, the basic experience that we come from those years was that we succeeded through dialogue to get to each other, to look each other in the eye and to find solutions jointly. But that means leadership. And unfortunately, those that are being led at the moment in terms of the current actions and protests and whatever that is taking place don't show the necessary leadership. And that's a big shortcoming as far as the current situation is concerned when we look at a dialogue that resolved our problems in the 90s. So we have to see how this unfolds. But I agree with Judith. I think the president has to come forward to show his leadership, to act accordingly, and he has to get the support from the Minister of Police and the Minister of Defence to show up and to underpin what the president is calling for, and then we can start to look at how we can resolve this by means of potential discussions, dialogue, etc.
Roelf Meyer, thanks very much indeed. He's the director of the In Transformation Institute. Also joining us for that discussion, Judith February, author as well as a visiting fellow at the Wits School of Governance. To both our guests, thanks very much indeed for your insights.